our own side. Speaking of which, the Democrats continue to defend Hillary Clinton, which is very exciting. So the new allegations about Hillary Clinton have basically been that Hillary Clinton sold essentially 20% of the uranium of the United States, or her State Department did, to Rosatom, which was the Russian Atomic Energy Agency, and that at the same time, the Russians were giving all sorts of money to the Clinton Foundation. The FBI and DOJ knew about it and did nothing. Hillary Clinton came out yesterday and she said, no, all this has been debunked, don't you understand? It's been debunked.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked. But here's what they're doing, and really, I have to give them credit. You know, Trump and his allies, including Fox News, are really experts at distraction and diversion. So the closer the investigation about real Russian ties between Trump associates and real Russians, as we heard Jeff Sessions finally admit to in his testimony the other day, the more they want to just throw mud on the wall. And I'm their favorite target, me and, President Obama. We're the ones that they always like to put into the crosshairs. So what she's saying here, first of all, I love C-SPAN Book TV. I've been on it a couple of times. It's always a lot of fun. I do like they're doing this from her kitchen, apparently, like from grandma's kitchen. But in any case, Hillary Clinton saying that she's completely innocent, this is why she lost, right? I mean, one of the reasons she lost is because she obviously wasn't. And most of the evidence that is now coming out about events that happened with regard to Russia actually is blowing back on things like the Podesta Group, not on Trump per se, at least the stuff that's being leaked. So we still have to reserve our judgment on what exactly has happened here. But it doesn't look good for Hillary Clinton. And people on the left who are willing to sort of brush away all of this are making a mistake, I think. Trey Gowdy, who is the head of the House Investigative Subcommittee, House Judiciary and Oversight Committee, he announced on Tuesday a joint investigation into how the FBI handled last year's investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. This, I think, is completely appropriate because, once again, I think it's pretty clear that James Comey had pre-decided the outcome of how this was going to work before it actually happened. So that is another controversy that just will not die. Okay, so I want to get to some things I like, some things I hate, and then we'll deconstruct a little bit of culture. So let's jump right in. So let's begin with things I like today. So, things I like. I just finished reading all the way through Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed. So people are constantly asking, what's a good book about kind of Jewish philosophy? It's a pretty sophisticated book about Jewish philosophy by Moses Maimonides, who is probably the most famous rabbi in the post-biblical era. Maimonides, Rambam, as he is called in the Jewish community because he's Moses ben Maimon, so Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, RMBM, right, Rish Mem, Bet Mem. So Rambam was the author of the Guide for the Perplexed. This was a series of letters that he basically wrote to one of his students all about trying to square religion with secularism. And it's quite fascinating, especially because there's a bit of a misconception inside some parts of the Orthodox Jewish community that secular learning doesn't play a role in how great rabbinic minds have thought about the world. Half of this book is basically a restatement of Aristotelian theories about the creation of the universe and arguments about it. Maimonides was deeply engaged in secular culture, and that's what makes the Guide for the Perplexed so interesting. He talks about the questions of free will versus determinism. He talks about the questions of God's providence over the universe. He talks about questions about why bad things happen to good people. It's really interesting. This thing was written in the 12th century, rather, and it's still readable. This translation that you see up on your screen here was written, I think it was 1979, and it's a pretty good translation. Now, it is sophisticated. You should probably do some reading about Aristotle before you read this. I would suggest, as I've mentioned, Edward Fazer's books on Aristotelian theory. That gives you a good background in this. What's really fascinating culturally is that the Guide for the Perplexed was basically written at about the same time as Thomas Aquinas was writing Summa Theologica, and they mirror a lot of their logic, which makes a lot of sense because Aquinas was a Christian thinker who believed in the Old Testament, and Moses Maimonides was a Jewish thinker who believed in the Old Testament, and both of them believed in Aristotle. So the attempts to square Aristotelian theory with Judeo-Christian belief is one of their missions. It's something in which I deeply believe. Go watch my speech at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, if you're interested in seeing how I think this plays into the American founding. I'm actually writing a book on all of this right now that I'm looking forward to pushing out probably sometime next year. Okay, other things that I like. So yesterday, I showed you the CNN ad talking about how an apple is just an apple, unless, of course, it's not. So a fellow named Greg Tomlin, friend of mine, producer over at Michael Medved's show, he cut this ad in response to the CNN ad.
This is a man. Some people might try to tell you it's a woman. They might scream, woman, 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 over and over and over again. They might put woman in all caps. You might even start to believe that this is a woman. But it's not. This is a man.
So thanks to Greg Tomlin, very funny stuff. Obviously, CNN does not believe that, which is why whenever they do the We Are the Facts Network, you just go, no. Okay, time for a couple of things I hate, then we'll deconstruct some culture. So, things that I hate. So speaking of useless invocation of racism for no particular reason except to annoy people, Jesse Jackson, who, again, should really have very little to say about things racial. Jesse Jackson, given the fact that he used to call New York Hymietown and such, Jesse Jackson made the statement on Undisputed on Fox Sports 1 that, first of all, I don't know why Jesse Jackson is even on a sports channel. Why is Jesse Jackson on a sports channel? I love that Rush Limbaugh was booted off ESPN for saying that Donovan McNabb was overrated. And Jesse Jackson, it's totally fine for him to be on a sports channel talking about his perspectives on sports. What he's about to say here is so utterly nuts that I just have to play it for you. Here's Jesse Jackson.
All free agencies around the world owe their wages and their benefits to Kurt Flood, who paid the price of rebelling against a system of oppression. And it is oppressive. To go from picking cotton balls to picking footballs and basketballs without freedom is not very much progress. It's just a lateral move. And what strikes me is that in football, the reason why so many guys are standing when the president says, fire them, and we're talking about sons. These boys are not sons. They're sons of mothers who produce champions. They're not sons of the sons of mothers who produce champions. That's what they really are.
Okay, so I don't understand what he's saying in the last part because his Jesse Jackson's patterns of speech are difficult to decipher sometimes. But what he is saying at the beginning there is he says that to go from picking cotton balls to picking footballs and basketballs without freedom is not very much progress. This is so insane. It's so insipid. To suggest that the football players who are earning millions of dollars to play football or basketball players who are earning millions of dollars to play basketball and they don't have freedom, they can say whatever they want off the court. They can do whatever they want off the field. This idea they don't have freedom. I am an employee, right? Or I have employees. If my employees speak out in terrible, awful, evil ways, there are punishments and there are consequences. Okay, the idea that Jesse Jackson is going to go around saying that employees are the same as slaves is just insipid. And again, it's insulting to slaves. I mean, you're really going to equate like Steph Curry with a slave? I don't think Steph Curry would do that. But if this is the line that we're going to use from now on, then race relations are basically dead. Okay, other things that I hate. This cartoon appeared in the Berkeley student newspaper a couple of days ago. Alan Dershowitz was speaking on Berkeley student campus. This one is directly from Der Stürmer. I mean, this is completely from the Nazi newspapers. It's a very ugly picture of Alan Dershowitz with the hook nose and the fat lips. And it says the liberal case for Israel. And then behind, and there's sort of a board that he's putting his face through speaking to students. And then behind the board, there's a foot stomping what appears to be a Palestinian person with a Palestinian flag, and in his hand, an IDF soldier shooting a child. Okay, this is just pure anti-Semitic dribble. The idea that, number one, IDF soldiers are just going around shooting Palestinian children for no reason at all, for fun of it, and that Alan Dershowitz is being paid off by these people because he's a Jewish front, basically for evil Jews. You could legitimately remove the caption, the liberal case for Israel, and just write Judaism. And then you could remove the caption IDF and just put a Jewish star, and this would look like it's directly from a Nazi newspaper. No retractions from the UC Berkeley newspaper. Pretty insane stuff. Okay.
Reform, and do you believe, like some conservatives, that we need to slow the growth of total immigration?
I don't believe that we need to slow the growth of total immigration. As somebody who my great-great-grandparents got here in the early 20th century. And then, their extended family was all murdered in the Holocaust. But I'm a believer in immigration. What we have right now is, honestly, everybody should agree on immigration. It's the easiest issue in the world. Shut the border, figure out what to do with the people here. The only reason you even have to shut the border is because you have the welfare state. If there were no welfare state, then we could have free flow of people across the border. You could come in, you could work, you could leave, there'd be free commerce. You wouldn't be a net loss in terms of the tax dollar. You wouldn't be not paying taxes and then taking benefits. So you can have one of two things. You can either have a welfare state with very restrictive immigration, or you can have a non-welfare state with complete free flow of immigration. If we're going to have the welfare state, which realistically speaking we do, then what we have to do is we have to figure out how to shut the border now so that we're not incentivizing millions of more low education people to cross the low skill people who don't speak English to cross the border. And we actually start enforcing our visas because 40% of the folks who are here illegally have overstayed their visas that we gave them in the first place. And then we figure out what to do with the folks here. And in my view, whether that's a pathway to citizenship or whether that is a pathway to legalization, that doesn't become immediate until after the border is actually secure. Because until the border is secure, it's an open invitation to come in. Because how exactly are we going to tell? Is there a red stamp on your illegal immigration passport? There's no way to tell. If you come over today versus you came over 10 years ago, we can't tell that. There's no way to tell that. So the fact is that everyone sort of agreed on this going in, that it was going to be border security and then immigration reform. And then Barack Obama and Democrats in the Senate said that here's the new deal: border security, immigration reform, and no border security. And then they used that as a weapon to wield against Republicans. And again, this is an example of Republicans not understanding how the left operates. The left never wanted immigration reform. They wanted to run on immigration reform. The left wanted to be able to look in 2014 at all the Latinos and say to them, all the Hispanics, and say to them, look at these evil right-wingers. Look at these evil white-wingers. The reason they stopped immigration reform is because they hate you. Not because they have a rational, but because they hate you. Right? Obama could have done this during his first 2 years. He didn't. The reason he didn't is because he wants that issue as a club to divide people. And so we could come to an agreement on this. Everybody, left, right, center, basically agrees on the basic proposition that I'm stating right now, which is that you can't continue a free flow of immigration into a welfare system. But that's not politically advantageous. So my biggest problem is with both parties. I mean, the Republican Party, on the one hand, says the pro-immigration reform people who want to leave the border open say, on the one hand, we need more free labor for our businesses, which is a really kind of nasty way of churning through people, who don't have high education. It's not about American freedom. It's about we need them to pay our Social Security. I mean, they've actually said this, right? We need young Latino immigrants to pay Social Security for all the old white people. That's nasty. And on the left, you have people who want to leave the border open because those are all potential Democratic voters if you can just get them into the welfare.